I talked to the police chief of Dover, Massachusetts, Carl Sheridan. He had been police chief 12 years earlier, too, when this all happened. Being an old law enforcement man myself, I was sure that the chief would be straight with me. "Did it really happen, or was it a hoax of some sort?" I asked him. "It was real," he replied. "Those boys really did see something that night." Has anything like it happened around Dover since then? Has the creature been seen again within the last 12 years? "Not to my knowledge," replied the chief, "but it sure caused a stir to this little place back then, and people around here still talk about it. It was weird. Really weird." Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazzocca, and Andy Brody were teenagers then. It was April and spring was in the night air. They were just riding around in Bill's Volkswagen, gabbing about girls and potential summer jobs. Farm Street is narrow and winding, flanked by woods and pastures. As the car poked along, heading towards Smith Street, something loomed up in the headlights. "At first, I thought it was an animal frozen or stunned by the headlights," said Bill. "But then I realized that I was looking at some unusual human-like creature. It was climbing over a stone wall, creeping along near the road, and it looked to be less than 4 feet tall, with a large-shaped head like an egg. But it was as big as the biggest of watermelons. It had round glassy eyes that kept staring at the headlights. It didn't move for almost a minute, so I got a good look at it. The eyes were red and its skin peach-colored, almost like a baby's, and had no hair that I could see. It didn't seem to have any nose or mouth or ears, but a thin neck that didn't seem strong enough to support the large head. It had long, spindly legs and arms with big hands and fingers, and it seemed to be clutching at the rocks with its fingers and toes. I must confess," said Bill, "at seeing it, I panicked, screamed, and sped off down the road. We returned later that night with others to the same spot, but the creature, soon to be called the Dover Demon, was not to be seen by us again that night." Interviewing Bill Bartlett 12 years later in January 1989, now aged 29, his story hadn't changed. The creature had a bloated look, he recalled. It was almost weak-looking, like one of those malnutritioned kids you often see on television. It had a featureless expression, almost sad, like it was starving. 2 hours after Bill, Mike, and Andy had their encounter, John Baxter, age 16, was walking home from his girlfriend's house on Miller's Hill Road, not far from Farm Street. John was hoping to thumb a ride home, but he saw no cars on the road, so he started trudging the road slowly in the night. Coming the other way, walking up the street on the opposite side of the road, was a little dark figure which John assumed was an acquaintance of his named Matt Bouchard, who lived near his girlfriend's house. It was almost midnight, but John didn't think it was too unusual to see the young Bouchard boy out walking near his own home. "Hey, Bouchard, how are you?" he shouted across the road as they were about to pass, but he didn't get a response. Then he realized that the little figure standing some 20 feet away was not Bouchard. It stopped, as did John. "Who is that?" he shouted. It was the same creature Bill Bartlett had seen earlier that evening. It was a little over 3 feet tall, John described it, and it looked like a big monkey with a large figure-8 head, like a big baby with long arms and legs. It just stood there staring at me, and I started shaking in my boots. When you see something like that, you don't want to stick around to see what it's going to do. I was hypnotized, and I really thought it was going to jump at me, but it just stared for what seemed like 10 minutes. It was clutching at the rocks and little trees by the roadside, as if for support, keeping its big, shiny orange eyes on me. Then, as quick as a wink, it turned and scurried down the road and over a hill into the woods. I turned and raced away, flagging down a car when I got to the intersection of Farm Street, and I got a ride all the way home. Neither Bill Bartlett nor John Baxter had heard of each other's experience until later the next day. They met later and shared stories of their encounters, but neither boy knew the other prior to their mutual experience, yet their descriptions of the creature matched perfectly. 2 nights later, Bill Tainter of Devon and Abby Brabham of Sherborne also saw the demon at night by the side of Springdale Avenue near downtown Dover. As with Bill Bartlett, the creature seemed attracted to Tainter's car headlights. Bill and Abby, who were deeply shaken by the experience, described it as beige-colored, with a big oblong head, no nose, no tail, big eyes that glowed green in the headlights. Neither the police, parents, nor friends of those who saw the creature doubted their stories, and even after all the years that have passed since those April nights in 1977, the eyewitnesses stick to their stories. It was not a teenage prank or hoax. Many so-called experts, including Walter Webb, a director of Boston's Museum of Science, investigated the sightings of this little gnome-like creature called the Dover Demon, and he was satisfied that it does exist. Newspaper reporters flooded the little village of Dover, population 5,000, got their story, and left, and the incidents were soon forgotten, except, of course, by those who live in Dover. Although only 15 miles from metropolitan Boston, Dover is deep in the woods, off the beaten track, and except for the demon, it's usually undisturbed. Why, one wonders, did this delicate peach-skinned nocturnal creature choose quiet little Dover as its nesting place? We shall probably never know, but an evening drive down Farm Street, or a stroll to the corner store for milk or bread, or even a quiet bicycle ride at dusk in Dover, never fails to bring a chill to the nape of one's neck. For who knows when the shy little demon of Dover might decide to show its ugly head again.